Good evening, everyone. Welcome to We the People's Forum. It's a Braver Angels event where everyday Americans get time at the podium. My name is David Lapp. I'm a co-founder of Braver Angels and the director of We the People's Project. So the purpose of We the People's Forum is to hear from everyday Americans on the issues of the day. We hear from people of all races, classes, places, and politics, and with a particular focus on hearing from people who consider themselves to be working class or blue collar or everyday Americans. And We the People's Forum is brought to you by the We the People's Project leadership team. And to learn more about our project, you can visit www.braverangels.org/WPP. So our forum tonight is, can we move forward on abortion? And this is a difficult issue. And we're coming at this as fellow citizens to listen to each other, to hear each other's perspectives, and to see if there's any kind of emerging points of common ground that we can see on this. And we're coming here as people who see ourselves as pro-life, pro-choice, or something in between, or other, or not sure. And some of us are very passionate in our views and know exactly where we are on this issue. And some of us find ourselves in the middle or conflicted on the issue. And that's all important. And we encourage all of you, no matter where you come from on this issue, to speak freely and civilly here tonight, and let's hear each other. So our goals for this evening are a better understanding of the experiences and perspectives of some everyday Americans on the issue of abortion. Second, we have discuss areas of common ground, in addition to acknowledging and respecting differences. And then third, learn something that might be helpful to others in our country. So for the agenda tonight, we have three parts to We the People's Forum. In the first part, we're going to have a discussion with our three first speakers. And our three first speakers, as you saw from the invitation, includes a woman who switched from pro-life to pro-choice after an unplanned pregnancy in her work as a maternal health nurse, a woman who switched from pro-choice to pro-life after having an abortion, and an African-American community leader who's conflicted on the issue. And then, so that's the first part. In the second part, we have Q&E, questions and experience. It's a time to hear from you all. Anyone is welcome to ask the speaker a question, or anyone is welcome to share how a life experience has shaped their view on abortion. And if you're sharing that latter, how a life experience has shaped your view on abortion, you have 3 minutes for your remark. And then finally, the last point, common ground action points. We're going to explore what are the points that we might be able, what are some emerging common ground action points where people on both sides might be able to agree. So we're going to hear from our first speakers on their ideas, and then we're going to open it up to people in the Zoom audience to share your ideas. And I should also say that when we open it up to the Zoom audience, we're going to hear from a balance of pro-life, pro-choice, and other perspectives. And we'll talk about how we're going to do that, but just wanted to give you that preview. So our ground rules here are, for this conversation, the same ground rules that we use for a lot of our Braver Angels workshops, and you can see them there. First, we're here to understand others and to explain our views, not to convince anyone to change their mind. Second, we want to speak for ourselves and not try to represent any outside group. Third, let's stick to the spirit of the activities designed for each stage of the meeting. So for example, if the activity is sharing our own personal experiences of the issue or asking a question, that's all we do then, even if it means resisting the urge to expound upon our own opinion. And then finally, it's standard stuff that we all know, taking turns, not interrupting others, listening to everyone, being respectful, as in no eye rolling or loud sighs when someone is speaking, etc. In other words, bringing our best selves to a difficult conversation. So that says it right there. Let's try to bring our best selves to a difficult conversation. So I'm going to stop the share here so that we can all see each other. So our three first speakers here, I'm going to introduce them and then we'll get right into it. Our three first speakers are Liberty Crouch Taylor. Liberty, if you want to wave. She's a public speaker, ordained minister, digital fine artist, and author of Demons Release Trilogies, a book series that chronicles Liberty's journey from drug addiction and homelessness to healing and finding faith in Jesus Christ. Maureen May. Maureen, if you want to wave to us. Maureen May is, maybe say something so we can, I think you're out of the screen. Unmute yourself and say something and wave yourself so we can see you. Maureen is a registered nurse and has worked as a maternal health nurse.
Here I am.
There you are, Maureen.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. Maureen is a registered nurse and has worked as a maternal health nurse and also in the neonatal intensive care unit. And then Janelle Burke. Janelle Burke, go ahead and unmute yourself and say something so we can see and wave so we can see you.
Hello.
There you are, Janelle. Janelle is a former nurse and school board candidate. She's the founder and editor of Wake Up Snowco and co-founder of a community outreach organization dedicated to healing in the Black community and for veterans. So to our first speakers and to everyone, welcome to We the People's Forum. So glad and honored that you're here to share a little bit about your experience and perspective. And I do also want to note that if anyone we have a wonderful team here of people working in the background, Zoom event managers. And if you look at the participant list, you'll see them at the top. They have asterisks next to their name. And in particular, I want to point out where it says TS Hank Fay, TS stands for troubleshooter. So that means if you have any Zoom troubles, Hank Fay is your friend. So you can, and he has his number there. You could even call him, or you could chat to him in Zoom. And we'll get to we have a couple Q&A managers, and we'll get to, when we're in that portion of the program, how the Q&A managers will be able to help us as well. But all right, let's get right into this. So I'm going to start with you, Liberty. And so Liberty, first question, what life experiences have influenced your values and views about abortion? And take up to 5 minutes. Go ahead,
Okay.
Liberty.
Thank you. And everyone, I just want to say hello, and I'm so glad I get to be here with you guys all around the world right now. So I just want to say thank you. And so in order to expound on that, I have to give you a little background. I'm going to be 44 years old this year. I just want to make a picture for you of my life so that you can understand or maybe see where I'm coming from. So I'm going to be 44 years old this year, and my life started off pretty early. At the age of 15, I got pregnant and had my first child. That was a very abusive relationship that I was in. And I was, that was it. I finally get out of that abusive relationship. But I don't know if anyone knows about abusive relationships. I was going back and forth, and I ended up getting pregnant by him again. And so I wanted to say that today in my new life, in Christ Jesus, I'm a Christian, and my new life, I am totally pro-life, where of course I have, different thoughts towards that too, but just backing it up, the pro-life was, the pro-choice was first. I was, without really any guidance or understanding, on the whole abortion issue. All I knew is at 17 years old, I didn't want to have this baby. I didn't know what I was going to do with another baby by this abusive man. And I never thought it through. I never asked anyone for their thoughts towards it. All I knew is I can't have another child with this person. And it wasn't the child's fault. But here again, early in my life, I didn't care much about others' lives, much less the child that was growing inside of me. I was very self-consumed and just on a survival of just me trying to survive. And so that's basically that. So I personally have experienced abortion. And going through that, just suppressing it, the aftermath is just kind of suppressing all of it, and just trying to get out of my thoughts. And that's a whole big deal to actually go through an abortion later, in so that was that's before I cared about life, anything like that. I was very young, and I'm at that time, I could say that I was actually probably glad that the abortion was an option. Not caring about or actually considering the life growing inside of me to be a life. So I can empathize on the pro-choice aspect. Now, as a Christian adult person who actually, I actually have experienced love now, and life, and have lived, to the point of healing myself and going through a lot of healing because of all the traumatic experiences that I've endured. So now I'm pro-life, and the I look at it now is because now I've experienced love, and I believe that with love is life. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing that Jesus Christ, Holy Spirit, lives inside of me, who is life, and yet I'm making agreements with death or murder. Of course, there's always a reason why it would be, logical defense of being, a good reason to have an abortion. But there's never, to me now, in my understanding and in my views, I don't agree with abortion because of, how do you say it? Just being irresponsible as a person. If I were raped, if I were in a different, situation where it was going to be bad for me to, it would have killed me to have a baby. I would have died. The baby, it would have been unhealthy for the baby. Other things like that, I can understand. But just on the simple scale of being irresponsible person, having sex without protection, getting pregnant, and just it's
Take
an
about 15 more
inconvenience.
seconds, Liberty.
Okay. What? Oh, and I was
Take
just
about
going to
15
say,
more seconds. We can wrap it up.
okay, but just out of an inconvenience, get an abortion, I don't agree with that. No way.
All right. Thank you for starting us and sharing a bit of your experience, Liberty. Maureen, let's go to you. And the same question: what life experiences have shaped your values and views about abortion? Take up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks. I did not time myself, but I'll try to do the 5 minutes. Thank you again for having me join this wonderful conversation. I think about pro-life and I think about pro-choice stances, and I think they're quite complex, and sometimes we oversimplify the terms themselves. And by simplifying the terms, we misunderstand, or it leads to misunderstanding, which only leaves one party believing harsh misconceptions about the other. And that's why I'm excited to be here in Braver Angels to share my own personal story. So I'm here representing my own view as a woman who had an unplanned pregnancy in the last year of my nursing school education. I'm proud to share with you that I have been a direct care registered nurse at the bedside in an acute care setting hospital for over 37 years. And if anybody's ever heard me talk before, and anybody that knows me knows that I love my profession, I love my career, and I have a deep passion in caring for the underserved and impoverished and marginalized population that I do care for in the North Philadelphia hospital, a tertiary care center. And it's the second poorest district in the United States. So I love taking care of that type of population. It's been 25 years I've been there. And I could never imagine changing my career at all. It's just something that I can't imagine changing, or the choice that I made to have my first child. So 38 years ago, and 3.5 years into my education towards my goal of becoming a nurse, I learned that I was pregnant. Fearful that I may not make it through my last year of schooling, pregnant, and unsure that I would ever return, I considered an abortion as an option. It really was the first time in my life that I embraced such an option. So I took my chances and made the choice to continue school. And I did have my daughter 3 days before I graduated. But it was a choice for me. And I was happy to have that choice. But there was a time in my life where my values completely aligned with the pro-life movement. And these values were a reflection of my religious upbringing, my parents and my siblings and family members and community. We supported families that had special needs children. We fostering children. In fact, my family would foster babies that were born in the hospital, and once they were discharged, would come to my home until they were adopted. So that was what we did as, I was young. I was in my teenage years. We also were partly counseling young teenage mothers as to what their options may be. And obviously, back in the late 70s, early 80s, it's really we would call them young unwed mothers. We also belonged to youth groups. I did anyway, and my siblings, that through our actions, we assisted with prison ministry. We supported immigrant refugees from Vietnam. We also participated in ministry and service where our brothers and sisters in the church and the community were faced with end-of-life care. That's another Braver Angels discussion. But as a teenager, I had the experience of an Asian American teenage girl that came in. She's a friend still to this day, spent the last months of her pregnancy living with us. Her family chose to hide the shame of her pregnancy and had talked her into giving up her baby for adoption. So she hid in our home for several months, and she never wanted to give up her baby. And I recall so vividly how she cared for her baby up until the moment that he was taken from her in the hospital. And as I look back on that life lesson, I believe that a pro-choice approach may have saved the emotional devastation that she still endures today. So pro-choice is the basic right to decide whether to have children or not. When I proclaim that I am pro-choice, am I telling people that I believe it's okay to have an abortion, even when I didn't have an abortion myself? And the answer is yes. It would be yes. I do believe in the right to choose. But with a caveat, the gestational age needs to be considered. Also note that I would not participate in an elective abortion procedure. I could not do that personally. But I would assist in the medical nursing care of a mother that required life-saving measures, or I would assist in helping a mother and counseling a mother that had an abortion because of a rape. But I mentioned gestational age. Every state has a law that is different of when an abortion can happen, if you can have an abortion. But in the state of the Commonwealth of PA, we do not resuscitate babies. I am a resuscitation nurse in a neonatal intensive care unit at less than 24 weeks. And that's really the place in which the baby can survive outside of the womb. And 23 weeks is the earliest that we could ever do that, but that the mother, makes that decision at that point. And I have witnessed amazing technological advances that have occurred in neonatology, and these advances are stunning. I would have never known this. I spent almost 30 years as an adult intensive care unit nurse, and I was dealing with end-of-life decisions, advanced directive, for example, but I've changed to maternal health and
begin
caring
to
for
wrap
a
it up,
one-pound
Maureen.
baby, and
About
many
15,
years
30
later
more
having
seconds.
that baby come to the door and show us how far they've come in life, whether it's their 5-year-old, showing us their pictures, or an 18-year-old that made it into an Ivy League college. They show up our door and they show us that this can happen and that this is life. So there is, some I'm conflicted, and there's the caveat of the gestational age. So basically, I stay pro-choice. The reason is because I have some concerns about reproductive health and limiting, the rights of women. And in the words of Alice Paul, who was a very vocal leader in our women's suffrage movement, she advocated for us the right to vote and for the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. She actually said that abortion is the ultimate exploitation of women. Now, that's many, many years ago, and I understand that it's different today, but many early feminists in the 19th
Maureen,
century
if you could
believed
begin to
that
wrap it up,
abortion
we
was
need to move on to the
exploitation of
next
both
part.
women and children. And I look at this in the perspective of, because we did not have the opportunities for birth control and the
I think she can hear you.
technological advances that we have today. So I look at those words and I understand that that
Hey,
is
Maureen?
it's different today, but maybe if we had
Maureen, we're gonna have to wrap it
different
up for this part.
opportunities for women to get the health care that they need, to have, or I see the future in the future of patients, and I think of women that have contraceptive failure, or women that are in septic shock that lack access to basic reproductive care. And I think of these restrictions, which they didn't have all this technology back in the days where they said abortion is an exploitation of women. I don't necessarily believe that either, but it's just a perspective that I see. And if we had women that were taken care of, that they could get the health care that they need, that we have a system that is broken when it comes to health care. And also we have women, I remember only having 6 weeks to go back to work after
Maureen,
having a
I'm sorry,
child.
I'm gonna have
We
to,
had
Maureen, I'm
different
not sure if you can
opportunities
hear me.
for
I'm gonna
women
have
to
to
be
mute
able.
you. I'm so sorry, everyone. I really don't want to do that. I think she probably wasn't able to hear me. But Maureen, thank you for sharing your story. I know we're only touching the surface. We're just
Thank you.
only here a little bit.
I
but
can't
thank you
hear you,
for-
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. So I figured that was the case. I'm sorry, Maureen. We're gonna move. We have to move on to the next speaker now to continue the conversation. Janelle, if you could go next. What life experiences have shaped your values and views about abortion? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, so I don't really have a lot of experience around even dealing with abortion as far as me personally, but I have lots of friends who went through the process of having abortions between the ages of 13 to 17 years old when we were younger. I was the same age as they were. And one of my best friends, she had 6 abortions by the time she was 16 years old. And the last abortion she had was literally 3 months before I found out I was pregnant with my son. And I saw what happened when she had the abortion. She had to give birth to the baby because she was over 5 months pregnant. They stabbed the baby in the head with a pair of scissors, and the baby died in front of us. That is something that I don't think I could ever even sit through again in life to even experience. But that was one thing for me that really solidified in my brain that abortion was a not okay thing, because we didn't have that conversation at home. We learned about what a girl would go through. And then once I became a little mini woman, then this is what's going to happen if you get pregnant. But abortion never came up as an option. So I wasn't raised to even think of those things because it was an inappropriate topic in my family, that they wouldn't have those conversations with us. So when I found out I was pregnant, I found out it was some things that happened. And long story short, I chose to keep my son against the advice of a doctor because I was 15 years old when I got pregnant. The doctor said have an abortion. That's when my mom had to tell me in the doctor's office what an abortion was, what that truly meant, and what that meant for me. So I chose to keep my son. And then, the older I got, I started getting more into watching my friends have these abortions because they wouldn't stop. My friend was addicted to crack cocaine, alcohol, and was a prostitute since the age of 13. So she used abortion as birth control. The last abortion she got, we went out of state to get it. And they did what was basically a Mississippi appendectomy. They put her under anesthesia and they removed her uterus so that she can no longer have kids. And that's something that historically has happened to Black women. In 1961, I believe Fannie Lou Hamer, she had a hysterectomy when she went in. They took away her choice to have a baby. So a lot of people in the Black community didn't have a choice to choose whether or not to have a baby. So for me, I feel like, I get asked a lot, like, what is your stance on abortion? And my stance is, I'm pro me and I'm pro you doing you, as long as you're doing you responsibly. Because like I said, I couldn't imagine having to deal with all these things. But now you look at it and we have all these rights as women now. We have HIPAA to protect us, which we didn't have when everything started really coming into play. So I feel like the path that I'm on and I'm pretty much, I'm pro-choice when it comes to what you want to do with your body, but I'm pro-life because I believe at conception, a baby is born, that's when the baby is there. I believe that when you die, you need to have somebody there for you as well. You're supposed to, take care of people from the womb to the tomb. That's the way we're supposed to be as humans. So if we can't do that as human beings, then we need to be responsible. But using birth control literally or abortions as birth control is just completely irresponsible. And, I'm all into people having that, life, liberty, and their pursuit of happiness, but at what cost?
All right. Thank you, Janelle. And now the next question is a chance to, we've already heard some of your own kind of reservations and concerns, but let's dive into that a little bit more with starting with Liberty. Liberty, what concerns or reservations do you have about your own perspective, which you consider yourself pro-life now? What are some, what are the potential downsides that you see with your view, and or concerns or reservations you have, and about the side that's typically associated with your view? Any of that, if concerns or reservations or potential downsides. And take up to 3 minutes, Liberty.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's transparency. And with that, I want to say that the downsides are the emotional devastation. I agree with that. I have experienced emotional devastation because of abortion. And that emotional devastation, I believe, it doesn't, if I was going to have a child out of wedlock or because of my own irresponsible behavior, I don't believe that emotional devastation is cause for pro-choice abortion. I can't agree with that. But the gestational age, which I'm not even familiar with all of that. All I know is that, when there's a heartbeat, there's a life now. And now being pro-life, I believe that a life is a life. And if the life that's growing inside of me or another person, that the option for abortion because of emotional devastation only, I don't consider that as personally, I don't consider that as I don't like that idea at all, because I did that, and so I can empathize with that understanding, but I don't agree with it. I do know that.
So Liberty, let me see if I'm hearing you right. You're talking about kind of emotional devastation that you've experienced with abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Are there, when it comes to, because I think you view yourself today as pro-life, would you say that you have any kind of, are there any points within your view that you say, oh, that's tough, or this point, I think you've already said a couple of points, I can empathize with people who are pro-choice. Are there any other things like that where you find yourself thinking about kind of maybe second thoughts, or you feel a little conflicted, or some concerns about kind of the possible implications of your view?
The possible implications of my view being pro-life, I just feel like being pro-life for me is not just black or white. It's not just yes or no. Pro-life for me, I feel like, if there was going to be some type of, and I'm not the one that writes the laws and says you can have an abortion if this is the case. I'm not the one to do that. All I know is that, where's the moral aspect, not what I would judge as good or bad, but I would just say that, in the matter of life and death, choose life.
Okay, so I want to go to Maureen. And Maureen, same question for you. What are some concerns or reservations that you have about your own view, potential downsides that you see with it, or concerns or reservations about the side that's typically associated with your view?
Sure. I guess the downsides, as Liberty suggested, was the gestational age. So I guess that creates limits, and does that lead to reduction in reproductive rights? That's really the downside. So, I understand that I guess it's about 4 or 5% of women receive abortions because of healthcare related issues. But also there's always the statistic of 1 in 4. The downside that I see in learning a different type of medical care is that if we say that pro-choice is the way to go, I understand that there are no humane abortions. And I read more and more about this because I am a neonatology nurse, and we're starting to understand more about fetal pain as another consideration. There's studies. Studies no longer view fetal pain as just a gestational window of 12 to 24 weeks as impossible. They don't view it that way anymore, which they did. And studies do view it that way, but most studies don't anymore. But the overall evidence points towards the experience of pain as early as 12 weeks of gestation, which is 3 months, right? So that's the concern. And the other concern is body, like I said before, the autonomy of a woman's body and the choice after a certain gestational age, and also the right to privacy. Will that impact, a woman? So limiting the rights of women are a concern of mine, especially their reproductive rights. And the other piece of that would be, my concern is I may not participate in an elective abortion procedure. And I don't think I would as a birth control measure, but I do believe in a woman's right to choose. But on my perspective, again, I go back to the gestational age, and we take care of patients all the time. And I've taken care of patients that have murdered people, have raped and assaulted other humans, and the care that I provide does not change. But on the other hand, I do consider that one of my reservations to my position would probably be the humane abortions. Is there fetal pain, and also the bodily autonomy after a certain gestational age. And so the question, I guess, would be, am I pro-choice or pro-life up until a certain gestational age? But yeah, that's pretty much one of my concerns.
All right, thank you, Maureen. Janelle, how about you? Concerns or reservation with your own view? Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you
go. So when it comes to my view, I think my concern comes into play with the community work that I do. I work with a lot of children and a lot of teenagers. So when people hear me, specifically when youth hear me say, that I'm against, not really against it, but like I said, for me, I'm not going to have it. I have 7 children. So after having 7 children, it's pretty obvious what my choice is for me. But I sit here and the kids always say, well, I didn't come to you because I thought you might judge me. And then I had to tell them and admit to what happened to me when I was 15, and let them know that I was a mother at 16. And because of my choice to choose, my son is now 25. And they didn't realize that, because a lot of people don't realize my son is my son because he looks like my little brother. So we sit here, and I feel bad, but when me being a Republican, I see the way things are playing out, right? And they're so up here in Washington anyway, I can only speak to the people in my party up here that I deal with. And a lot of them, they even make me feel like, as a woman who goes to Planned Parenthood for her gynecological care, that I'm wrong for even going into that building. So when you have people that affiliate me with the Republican Party, that's what they also see. They don't want to see Janelle for Janelle Nicole. They want to see me for that letter. So, the downsides to having the position that I have, and, the beliefs that I hold, it becomes one of those things where if you push too hard, you push people away, or you push people into fear, and fear causes us to do some really just silly things or some harmful things to ourselves. And I just kind of feel like if the reservations that I have right now was just like really speaking out on it, but I also know it's what I would call what I'm called to do. It's not so much, me saying you can't have one because if a woman has an abortion, I'll be there to hold her hand. I'll be there to pray with her. I'll be that pillar without judgment. But we just have to understand that everybody's their own person. And sometimes you just have to understand that everyone's human. So, you know, push the judgment aside.
Thank you, Janelle. So let's go now to action ideas. And this time I'm going to flip it. Janelle, I'm going to start with you and then go to Maureen and then go to Liberty. And the question is, and this is our last question before we open it up to the audience, but don't raise your hands yet. I'll tell you when we can start doing that. So Janelle, let me start with you. What in listening to each other here, and actually, let me ask this before we go to action. Sorry, I got my questions mixed up there. In listening to each other here, Janelle, what did you learn about how the other people's, Maureen and Liberty, see themselves on this issue? And did you see anything in common? So what did you learn about how Maureen and Liberty see themselves on this issue? And did you see anything in common? You can take up to 2 minutes.
Well, the one thing I see that we all have in common is that we care about people, that we really do genuinely care. And that makes it really hard for us to have the positions that we have because, you know, I'm conflicted. And I see that, in a sense, I won't say that Liberty, like she's standing on her own. She knows exactly where her viewpoint is and where her stance is. But I kind of feel like we're all kind of in this same boat that we're called to do something, whether it's being a doctor, whether it's being an outspoken Christian on being pro-life. Me, myself is, you know, so we're women that want women to be able to be themselves without reservation. But at the same time, I don't know, our beliefs are just so strong in what we believe in that, you know, we're our individual selves. So I really don't, I mean, I see them as strong women with opinions that matter, and I heard them. So,
Maureen, how about you? What did you learn about how Janelle and Liberty see themselves, and did you see anything in common?
Yeah, what we have in common is we're all women, and to Janelle's point, we do care, and we have our positions on, and Liberty certainly has her position. It's very clear, her position, which I appreciate that. Thank you, Liberty, for sharing that. And I really, I empathize with both Janelle and Liberty as a woman and having an unplanned pregnancy, but also having the experience of watching women give up their children for adoption, women that, you know, have lost children, women that I have taken care of in hospitals after they've had an abortion, a botched abortion, whatever that is. We are all women and we all want the best for one another. What I have learned is that we all have a different opinion. And I respect their opinions. And my opinion comes, I shift. I think that we, you know, Janelle is more like me, and you know, you have to do what you need to do at any particular time. Whereas Liberty has an experience that plants her exactly where she believes and wants to be. And I say I have shifted. And Janelle, having all the children that you have, I look at the African-American community that I work in, and I don't want them to lose the option of going to Planned Parenthood or going to get the care that they need reproductively. And that's how I care as a woman and as a nurse. And I know that, you know, you spoke of Planned Parenthood and having that option. And to Liberty, I am also glad that you had that option too. And that if you didn't have that option, maybe you would have a different view. But I appreciate your view, and you have experienced it and I haven't. So I have learned from both, and I appreciate having this conversation with both Janelle and Liberty.
Liberty, how about you? What have you learned about how Maureen and Janelle see themselves on this issue, and did you see anything in common?
Yeah, I honor you, ladies, very much so. I honor you, Janelle, for being strong and being able to walk with women through these hard places, you know, and also Maureen, you know, I wanted to say the thing that we have in common is we have all somehow experienced walking through unplanned pregnancies, whether it would be ourselves or another person. And I feel like having walked through that and having these experiences and how I feel now today versus how I felt when I was a teenager, I would handle it differently as far as my counsel to a person who may have to experience this today. My counsel would, be more on options rather than a certain death to a fetus, because a fetus is still alive to me.
Thank you, Liberty. And thank you, Maureen and Janelle, for opening up this conversation. So what we're going to do now is we want to expand the conversation. And if you could just wait for it to raise your hands just for a moment while I know we're wanting to jump in here. So this is Q&A time, questions and experiences. And we're going to call during this time on a balanced number of people who see themselves as either pro-life, pro-choice, or other, something else. And so before you start raising hands, let me just set this up a bit here. You can either share an experience and take 3 minutes for your comment, or you can ask a question, take up to a minute to ask a question of one of the speakers. And then speakers, if you could just give your responses in 2 minutes or less. So if you're sharing a comment, if you could respond to the first question that we asked our first speakers, what life experiences have shaped your values and views about abortion? And take up to 3 minutes for your comments. Or you can ask a question of the speaker. Now there's 2 ways that you can do this. You can do what some people are already doing, which is raising their Zoom hands. Now, if you do raise your Zoom hands, because we want to call on a balanced number of people in terms of pro-life, pro-choice, and other, I would ask that you just rename yourself. And you do that by clicking on the top 3 buttons, the dots in your video. Rename yourself exactly what Amanda Webster just did there. If you're other, put that in front. If you are pro-life, put PL in front of your name. Pro-choice, you say pro-choice or PC, just so that we know where you're coming from, so we can call on a balanced number of people. Now, if you prefer to chat your question or your remark to one of our Q&A managers, you can do that as well. Just click on the participant list, and then at the top of the participant list, you are going to see, let's see here, Q&A managers. Our Q&A managers aren't at the top of the list. I wonder why that is. But you're going to see 2 Q&A managers, Q&A manager Dennis and Q&A manager Martha Brown. You can message one of them with your name, where you're coming from on this, and just share, 1 sentence preview of your remark or your question, and for what speaker your question is for. So different ways to ask a question or share a remark. And we are going to go first to Amanda Webster, who is on other. So Amanda, go ahead. Are you sharing an experience, Amanda, or did you have a question? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Experience.
Okay, go for it. Take up to 3 minutes.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name's Amanda. I'm a recovered addict, suicide survivor, and mental health advocate. I grew up in a small conservative Missouri town where you were pretty much defined by the church you went to, and I was vehemently anti-abortion at the time. At 16, I moved to Arizona. I was raped by a classmate. I wanted to crawl out of my own skin. I couldn't do enough to scrub his touch away. And I didn't know about Plan B back then, thanks to the lacking sex ed we received. All I knew was that if I was pregnant, I would go to literally any means necessary to not have part of him growing in me, even if that meant taking my own life. Fortunately, I wasn't pregnant, but I became vehemently pro-choice. My parents died when I was 20 and 22. I desperately tried to find purpose. I wound up a volunteer escort at Planned Parenthood. Within a year, I fell pregnant. I had no money. I was self-harming, using cocaine and alcohol, was mentally unstable, and was in an emotionally abusive relationship. Still, I didn't want an abortion. I wanted a sense of family again. I reached out to the people I'd been conditioned to believe were my enemies, the people on the sidewalk. Though one of them took me to a few crisis pregnancy centers that offered baby necessities, it felt like nobody would listen to my needs, my fears, my desires. Instead, I was met with acrid demeanors. Truthfully, I felt like an incubator. So crestfallen, hopeless, and defeated, I had an abortion. I was consumed by resentment toward the pro-life crowd. I decided to write a book. Abby Johnson had just left her position as a director at Planned Parenthood and joined the pro-life movement. I reached out with a desire to interview her for research, but really I just fully intended to discredit her somehow at the time. Though the book never came into fruition, we kept in touch. 2 years later, I wound up pregnant again by the same man. My situation wasn't much better, but I was not going to have another abortion. Reluctantly, I told Abby. She helped me get what I needed, get on my feet, and even offered me a job. Now I have an 11-year-old son. I'd seen the best and the worst of people on both sides. It was the first time I started reflecting on what I genuinely felt about abortion, and this is where I landed. I understand that it's a separate living entity, but until it shares a reasonable sentience and ability to feel pain as necessary neural pathways develop, like I have, like I possess, I do not think that it has any more rights than any other living being to commandeer my body for its survival without my consent. When I was a teenager, I found a friend overdosing because she tried to induce a miscarriage when she couldn't obtain an abortion. After Roe was overturned, I had one friend try to take her own life and another die to a botched abortion that she tried to induce herself when access was taken. I've also seen women turn to substances and self-harm after having an abortion. It's far more of a mental health issue than we realize. I don't agree with banning it, but I do agree with reasonable restrictions and limits. And I also believe that we as a society could be doing a lot to lower the need for it. Banning it doesn't stop it. Telling women, often even married ones or ones in long-term
Amanda, if
relationships.
you could wrap it up in about 15 seconds.
Okay, telling women, often even married ones or ones in long-term relationships, not to have sex is about as effective as convincing the Pope to crowd surf at a heavy metal concert. So what do we do? Unfortunately, my 3 minutes is up here, but I did actually make a video on my YouTube, which is youtube.com/MentalAmanda after Roe was overturned, outlining what I think all parties could be doing to lower abortion rates while respecting both sides and their convictions.
Amanda, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your perspective and experience. I'm going to go to Andrea Barron. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And Andrea, do you have a question or?
No, I have a comment. Thank you.
Yes, go for it.
Thank you, David, for managing this, and to all the speakers. I have a very different perspective. I had an abortion when I was in my early 20s. My mother came with me at the time, and we're Jewish. We do not believe that Jesus Christ is our Savior. We do not believe in the Trinity. We believe that a fetus is not a human being, and that life does not begin at conception, that life begins after a baby is born. And I've heard so many Christian perspectives here. I feel that this is a question of religious freedom and religious liberty, and that Christians who believe in Jesus or Christians who believe that life begins at conception are trying to force Jewish women to have a baby when we don't believe that life begins at conception. And you can check the major Jewish organizations, the Union of Reform Judaism, conservative Jews, part of their belief system, you can look it up online, is a woman's right to choose. That's our religious belief. It's like, am I going to force Christians to give up your belief in Jesus Christ? I have no right to tell you not to believe in Jesus Christ. What right do you have to, not you personally, to tell Jews that we have to believe in Christian beliefs? We don't believe in Christian beliefs. We're not Christian, and we don't want to be Christian. Also, you may not be aware, the state of Israel, not only is abortion legal in the state of Israel, it's funded by the government. The Jewish state of Israel funds abortions for women. So this is throughout it's not just American Jews, it's the state of Israel. I personally do believe that there should be some gestational limits, just like we heard from many people, and that after, maybe 22 or 23 weeks, going back to Roe, states should have a right to place limits on abortion. And after 22 weeks, when the fetus can live outside the mother's womb, then abortion should be restricted unless there's a fetal abnormality or to save the woman's health. But before that, Christian conservatives have no right to impose their views on Jewish people. I also know that Jews from the Presbyterian Church, Christians from the Presbyterian Church, one of the two churches, it might be the Presbyterian USA and United Church of Christ, and also many agnostics and atheists who do not believe that life begins at conception and who do not believe that a fetus is a human being. And the person who put this, not only Christians who have the same perspectives, there could be a few other non-Christians. We all know that the 6 justices that overturned Roe v. Wade are all conservative Christians and they're all Catholic.
And
that
Andrea,
we-
take about 15 more seconds.
Okay, and I do believe that their religious beliefs are what are driving the discussion on abortion. Whether it's not every single person who's anti-abortion is a conservative Christian, that is driving the discussion in politics and among the American public. And I'd like people to reconsider how you want religious liberty for Christians. What about religious liberty for Jews, atheists, agnostic, and everyone who does not believe in your conservative Christian
Right,
beliefs
Andrea.
about abortion?
Thank you. Thank you for, I hear the passion in your voice and your view on that. Thank you, Andrea, for sharing. I'm going to go now to JC Carpenter. JC, did you have a question or an experience you'd like to share?
I'd probably like to share an experience. Bear with
Okay,
me.
go
This
for it.
is actually the first Zoom I've ever been on in my life. So thank you for having me and bear with me. But my experience is that I'm 3-time post-abortive. I ended the life of my first child at 18 years old. I called the person that I trusted most in the world, and that was my grandma. My grandma advised me to abort. I'd never really even thought about abortion before then. My grandma told me to call my aunt who had aborted, and my aunt told me to abort, and the guy that I was with said, whatever you want to do. Well, he was probably trying to be supportive and thinking that it was my choice. What I heard was, I don't care. And
let's see, you're coming in and out. JC, why don't you try turning off your video? That might help the quality of the video a little bit. So JC, I think we're gonna come back to you, and I'm gonna put you on mute and go ahead and turn off your video, and we'll see if we can come back to you. There is, let's see, is there a Kathy Katie? Kathy, I think you had a question. So Kathy, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
I understand that Janelle has a firm point of view, and I respect how she got there. My question for Janelle is, would you now deny a 17-year-old young woman an abortion?
All right, Janelle, take up to 2 minutes to respond. Janelle, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Could you repeat that? My thing was going out a little bit.
Oh, sure. Kathy, could you repeat your question?
Sure. I'm wondering if, Janelle, you would deny another 17-year-old an abortion now.
I would never deny anybody the right to do what they felt was appropriate with their body. Like I said, I will be there if someone had an abortion to pray with them, be a pillar to them, whatever they needed from me in that moment. And being pro-life, one thing you have to be is be there for a person when that person is in need, not just when they're doing what you want them to do.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Let's see. I want to see, is there somebody whose hand is raised who sees themselves as other on this issue? Are you saying, John, I see you say you're pro-life. I want to get to you. Oh, yeah. Okay. The person who is, you just raised your hand and you see yourself as other. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm another Kathy. Well, I would say right now I'm very conflicted about the whole thing. I was raised evangelical Christian. At that time, the main belief was it's a woman's choice. It's between a woman and God and her doctor. So to see what's happened has been very confusing. And what I would never be able to understand is there are 10 to 15% of pregnancies that end in miscarriage. And it's like, if those are humans, then why are they dying? And I think other thing that I've seen happen, I think religious freedom is so important too, as the Jewish woman said, that I see Christians now who I used to know and be part of, who are screaming and saying, well, if a woman dies because she has a ectopic pregnancy where it's in the tubes, let her die. That's God's will. And I think, to me, that's what's happened with the pro-life is so extreme. And also, I think that women are not being able to have the D&Cs they need to clean out if they have a miscarriage because people call it an abortion. And I would say there has to be more clarity. I mean, I understand that if people value life, we shouldn't just be, I mean, I agree that having an abortion just as birth control is not a good idea, and that it kind of devalues life. I also know Frank Schaeffer, who is one of the people who helped start the pro-life movement in America, and he now has great regrets at how extreme it has become. And I just feel like it's so complicated that that we can't assume that every woman has to be the same. And also what happens to the fact that women could be in other countries where they are so anti-abortion, they're arrested if they have a miscarriage. And I just feel like we have to honor people who believe in life, but if women don't have a choice, lots of women are going to die. And I would like to know how it can be explained that 10 to 15% of people have miscarriages. And if you have an ectopic pregnancy, if it isn't removed, the fetus egg that's fertilized, the woman will die and the egg can never develop. So I think it's way too complicated to make laws that restrict things, and also that stop people from going to Planned Parenthood for other kind of reproductive care. So I would say I lean toward pro-choice because of the fact that it's so destructive if you make it an absolute, but that I understand the position of pro-life as well.
All right, thank you for sharing where you're coming from. I'm going to go to John Jenkins for a pro-life perspective. John, what life experiences have shaped your values and views about abortion? Or did you have a question?
More of a comment, but can you guys hear me good?
Great, yes, I can hear you well.
Awesome. So when I started off as a kid in high school, I remember I was pro-choice, pro-abortion. And I remember, girls I had been with, I would have immediately gone towards that avenue at that age. But after living in the world and being to 5 countries and fighting in a war and coming back, I'm now find myself as pro-life. That being said, I am more of a centrist, and I believe that we should find a middle ground, write it in black and white ink and never change it ever again. But I actually pulled up some interesting facts because I didn't have time to write a speech today, and it's ages at what abortion is, majority of people get abortions at. And so like 15 to 19 years is only 8.5% of pregnancies go to abortion. 20 to 24 is almost 30%. 25 to 29 is 35%. 30 to 34 is 19.6%. 35 to 39 is 11%. So it actually, the older or younger you are, the less likely you are to have an abortion. I think that's kind of interesting fact. I also want to point out that a lot of people like to use things like rape, incest, those kind of things, or as a good argument for why abortion should be legal. And I want to point out that these things don't even equal 5% of all abortions. If I was to give you a sandwich that's 95% mystery, 5% bologna, would you be comfortable calling it a bologna sandwich? So that being said, I do think that we should find a middle ground. The problem is on the right, you have conservatives. That's conservatism. They believe in the conservation of keeping things the way they are. And on the left, you have Democrats that are more for, moving that line forward constantly. And so there's constantly an erosion of rights and an erosion of things. And so I think that a good middle ground idea would be that if you had rape, if it was incest, if it was something where the woman's going to die, if she gives birth to the baby, or if there's a deformity where the baby wouldn't live a good life, that in those situations, sure, I can come to the table and agree that abortion's an okay thing. Also, if maybe in the first 2 months, that way it's a very middle ground. Both parties aren't getting what they want, and both parties are kind of getting what they want. In a way, it's a very middleist view on that topic, because I think that, like people said, we shouldn't be using abortion is a contraceptive. I think that we should be finding other ways and educating. I know other people brought up the fact we should be educating people. I think that's very important. So it's kind of everything.
All right, thank you, John. And by the way, I'm going to start using the spotlight feature here because there's so many hands up so we can better see the speaker. I'm going to go JC, Richard, I want to note that we're going to go to you. I hear that your Wi-Fi is in a better place now, so we're going to come to you shortly. But before that, I want to go and hear from a pro-choice perspective. Janet, you have your hand up. Janet Hoy, do you have a question, or do you want to respond to the question, how have your life experiences shape
Yeah,
the
I-
values and views.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question, I guess first a comment, then a question. And first, I would just like to thank Liberty, Janelle, and Amanda for talking about very personal things in a really compassionate, kind, and informative way. And I know it's really hard to do that. So thank you to those speakers. What really struck me about all of the speakers was first, it's really obvious they had a choice. They had a choice to make. It wasn't limited to them, and they definitely had a choice around that. And the second thing was that they were really young. These are girls, not even women. You're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old girls. And that made me start to think about how different this issue can be based on your personal life situation and your own perspective. And I guess my question would be specifically to Liberty, if you're okay answering this, and that is that it sounded like you had an abortion at 17, and that was I think the right choice for you then, given your living situations, and it sounded like you were in an abusive relationship that was obviously really, really hard. And I just wonder, given your perspective now being more on the pro-life side, what you would say to your 17-year-old self. And I hope, I want us all to think about this, because I have been, about how this is manifest around personal responsibility. Because sometimes, many times, women, I think, make this choice because they don't have any income. They don't have a stable relationship. They might be homeless. The average person, I think as John said, or the biggest portion of women who get abortions are in their late 20s. They already have 1 or 2 kids.
Janet,
and they live at or below the poverty line. Sorry.
I do want to note that we do want people to either respond to the question or ask a question. It is,
Okay, well,
I do want Liberty to be able to answer your question, but just so that we know, where typically the thing here is we either respond to the question or ask a question. Liberty, did you want to briefly respond to Janet's question?
Yes. So what would I say to my 17-year-old self? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, what would I say to my 17-year-old self? Now today, I wouldn't be so quick to go and get an abortion. I would say to my 17-year-old self, what choices are there? What other choices are there? Let's talk about this. And I would say, let's find out if there's some other counsel we can. I had no counsel. I had no one that I could go to and have a decent conversation of options.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, let's find someone who we can talk about this with.
All right. Thank you. And I want to now go to see somebody who would be on the other, somebody who sees themselves as other. Let's see, Kathy Daniel, if you could unmute yourself. Do you have a question, or did you want to respond to the question?
It's an experience. Is that we can do it?
Yes,
okay.
Go for it.
The reason that I put myself as other is because I grew up in a very Catholic family, and in college, I wrote a long paper in a philosophy class and being anti-abortion. And then I went to graduate school right after college, and practically my second date with a guy in my department, it was 2 days after my period ended. I thought it was safe, and we probably had too much to drink. So it falls into the irresponsible pregnancy, but it was just, I didn't even know him. I didn't want a long-term relationship with him. And I had my abortion almost immediately after I learned I was pregnant. In my mind, I didn't view that as a life, as murder. And then years later, a very similar, irresponsible, being drunk in a pool, thinking, oh, you can't get pregnant in a pool. And so I think My experience of growing up in a very religious family where having sex outside of marriage was a taboo, what that led to for a lot of Catholics and maybe other conservative Christians is a lack of birth control. You know, just we shouldn't be doing it, so we're not doing it. So we're not taking precautions because, of course, we're not going to do that thing that we're not supposed to do. And then lo and behold, we get pregnant. So it is not a method of birth control. And so I am on the in the camp of I am pro-life. I believe I am for life. I really resent that conservatives have taken that and used it as a line because it makes it seem like those of us who have had abortions are murderers, and I really resent that. So I am pro birth control and pro sex education so that young women don't ever have to be in the position that I was in. That's it.
All right, thank you. I want to now go to JC Carpenter. And JC, I understand that your Wi-Fi is a little more stable now. So JC.
I certainly hope so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I drove down a little ways. I'm in my car. I stopped driving so that I could do this. And like I said, it was my first time ever. I'm not
Great.
sure what you
JC,
heard.
is your video on or is it off?
I think it's on. I can see myself on my screen. Can you see me?
Okay, great. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So my experience is that at 18 years old, I found myself pregnant. It was an unplanned pregnancy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Okay, great. So I called the person that I trusted most in the world. I didn't really know anything about abortion prior to that. I called my grandma. My grandma told me to abort. My grandma told me to call my aunt who had aborted her third child, and my aunt told me to abort. The guy that I was with told me that I do whatever you want to do, and I'm sure he was probably trying to be supportive, thinking that it was my choice. But what I heard was, I don't care. I ended the life of my first child and spent the next 25 years in denial, basically, about what I had done, trying to rationalize and justify the decision that I'd made. And it led to 2 subsequent abortions. The second abortion I had was basically because I had so many, quote, reasons that time that if I wouldn't have aborted that time, I would have had to admit that what I had done the first time was wrong, and I was unwilling or incapable of doing that. I spiraled out of control in drugs and alcohol and promiscuity, trying to search to fill the voids that I had in my life, and trying to make something of myself that I could be okay with, where I could feel some kind of way about myself. I was listening to the lady earlier who is Jewish and was talking about, life not beginning, humans not being humans until they're born. And today I'm absolutely unabashedly, very loudly pro-life, and not just pro-life, but anti-abortion. And I'm anti-abortion because it's something that traumatized me. And I've talked to so many women who have been traumatized by their abortions. I know today that the humans are humans from the very beginning. And something that is growing and developing inside of us, the way that we all did inside our own mother's wombs, is alive. And it doesn't, that 8 inches between the uterus and the outside world doesn't change what it was before to something different. I believe that every single human being has value. I believe that every single human being should be treated with dignity and respect. The life of the mother is, obviously important, but I believe that both humans should be treated as patients. And, I know the damage that abortion does to women. I tried to commit suicide several times. And I know many others who were devastated by abortion as well. So there's a whole lot that I could say. I'm not sure how much time that
Yes,
I have.
and if you could wrap it up, JC.
Okay, so yeah, a human is a human from the very beginning, and we all start out that way. Every
right.
single one of us. Thank you.
JC, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your experience. I want to now go to you're named PC, and you had given a preview of your comments, but your name is just PC. If you could unmute, you had the preview was, are you out? If you could, you said I would speak as someone who had an abortion with the support of my parents. Yes, are you there?
Late, but I'm home, and I am listening to this.
Okay, and what is your name?
And don't you bet this is going to be Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, okay. If we could, all right. We're going to actually go to Joanne Richards. Joanne, if you could, do you have a question, or would you like to share an experience?
Yeah, I have a question. I certainly have an experience that I can share, but one question that has not come up today in this conversation is, who is it that has the right to make the decision? Does the government have the right to make the decision on your behalf? And my answer to that question is no. And so I would ask that question of the three people that we've heard from today is, do you think that the government has the right to step in to tell me what I should or should not do with my health care?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Joanne. Does one of the speakers want to, we won't be able to hear from all three speakers probably, but does one of the speakers want to address their perspective on that?
Can I go?
Go ahead, Janelle.
So most of you all in Braver Angels know my stance on this one. I genuinely feel as a woman that I don't want the government telling me anything about my body. No man, nobody in government has the right to tell me anything. Nothing. I don't want them looking at legislation over my body. And I don't believe that the government should have any say in anything any of us do with our bodies. Because at the end of the day, it's ours, and we have to live with what we do to ourselves. But with women specifically, we give ourselves a piece of ourselves every time we ask for legislation to protect an inherent right that we already have under the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, U.S. Constitution. We're giving away ourselves to the government bit by bit with every piece of legislation we ask for. So no, the government has no, the only person that makes that choice is you.
Liberty, did you want to give briefly your perspective on that question? See. Okay, Liberty, if you wanted to speak, I can't hear you, but we can, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, forgive me. Please repeat the question, because for like the past 4 minutes, whatever, I was, my Wi-Fi went out and I just now got back on.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, the question was, does the government, in your view, have the right to tell women to tell women that they can't have an abortion?
To legislate medicine, basically.
To legislate what?
Medical care.
Okay, that's the question, Liberty.
Does the government have the right to legislate medical care? I believe they do. We also have a choice as far as who we're voting for to put into government. I believe that does the government have the right to say that we can or cannot keep a baby? No, I think the people are making the choices on their own.
All right. Thank you, Liberty. I'm going to go to our last perspective here, and then we're going to go to shifting to common ground action points. And I'm going to go to Rhonda Doherty. Rhonda, did you have a question or an experience that you wanted to share? Go ahead and unmute yourself, Rhonda. Oh, Rhonda, go ahead and unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Let's see here. All right, Rhonda, we're gonna have to.
I think I'm unmuted.
Okay, there we go. Did you have a question or an experience you wanted to share?
So I have a lot of points I want to make. Can I do that at this time?
If you could respond to the question, what life experiences have shaped your values and views about abortion?
Okay, I don't have any heavy story that a lot of these women have, that I have worked in the pro-life movement for 46 years. I've worked at crisis pregnancy centers since I was in college. I'm both a counselor and a liaison. I've been, like I said, when I was in college, I helped to start a birthright, and I've been doing it all these years since. And so I've worked with a lot of women. I've done a lot of research. I feel like I've learned a lot. And some of the points that were made, I thought were good ones, but other ones, I think they were just very hard for me to accept, because I think, can I say more? I think, first of all, when you work with women who are pregnant, these babies are born throughout those 9 months. So I don't understand how a baby is not a baby until it's born. We have babies born at 5, 6, 7, 8 months all the time. Yeah, how can that baby only be a baby at 9 months or when it's born? If we have babies born at 5 and 6 months who survive and are healthy children, healthy adults today, that's just a point that I want to put out there, because that's reality. And those are the things that aren't discussed. Another woman talked about how there needs to be.
Rhonda, if you could, I want to keep us focused on, instead of responding to each other, if you could give us, another minute or so, give us some window into how you came to your perspective on this.
For me, and this is, thank you. This is what I was going to try to say, that I don't believe, I do have a very strong faith. I am a very strong Catholic, and I did learn it through a speaker who came to our church. That was the first I really knew what abortion was. But I can argue the pro-life position never using my faith. And I think the point that the Jewish woman was making about it being all about a Christian perspective is totally false. First of all, Orthodox Jews and Muslims are strongly pro-life, as faithful Catholics and faithful Christians are. But for me, it's science, it's biology, it's the absolute biological fact that when sperm meets egg, it becomes a new human being, totally separate from that mother. It's not the mother's body. It is a totally separate human being's body. And so for me, yes, I came about this because of my faith. But when I discuss this with people, I don't so much talk about my faith as I talk about science, biology, and just the absolute truth of a human being growing inside of our bodies.
All right. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
Thank you.
And all right, so now we want to invite Len, if we could have all hands go down, and we're going to bring back into the conversation table here our first speakers. So we heard from a range of perspectives there. What we now want to do is we want to begin thinking about what might some emerging points of common ground be on this. So the question and I'm going to go to Janelle first, and then Maureen, and then Liberty. The question is, what is an action or actions that you would support and that you think people on the other side might support around the issue of abortion? So what's an action or actions that you would support and that you think people on the other side might support around the issue of abortion? And so Janelle, let's start with you and take up to 3 minutes, Janelle.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I don't know. I think if anything, it's more education. I think a lot of us would support more education just in general on abortion. And I think that's about the main thing, is more education. Because right now for me is, after kind of hearing everything, my perspective changed a little bit after hearing. So my brain kind of did just shuffle things. So the only thing I could come out with, honestly, is I think all of us would appreciate a little bit more education around the topic of abortion. and not even necessarily when a life is formed, but an abortion and the mental health side of abortion. A lot of education needs to be done on that. And I think we could probably all agree that if you're going to go into something like that, you need to know the outcome spiritually and emotionally, what it can do to you.
All right, so education. Let's go to Maureen. How about you? What do you see as action or actions that you could support and that you think people on the other side might support around the issue of abortion?
Well, I'll say that Janelle took my answer. I think that's the answer for much of what we have talked about today is education, and we've all been educated to many different sides and perspectives. I wasn't even thinking of the religious freedoms part of this, but I believe that that's something to consider, knowing other people's religions and what does that mean and what does that mean to us with our religious rights. But also education. I just wanted to point out that when a pregnant woman comes in for care, if they can get the care, is that they get genetic testing as well. So that's part of the package with where I work. And like I said, I work in a very underserved community. And, what we can agree to is education. What we can also agree to is supporting women, whatever. That's what a nurse does. They support a woman regardless of what position they're in. And as a nurse, obviously, we take care of patients in any type of a setting and any walk of life. And it really part of we have to have in our practice is compassion and respect for the inherent worth of a human being and the uniqueness of every individual situation. So, that's part of our oath and part of my oath. So I think that we can agree to that education and an understanding of where each individual comes from and understanding that it's not as simple as pro-life and pro-choice. As I said in the beginning, they have to be defined a little bit more. And I respect that, the religious freedoms too, and an understanding. So education in every aspect is key to, bridging the gap here, and really to an understanding of what we need to do with each other as human beings. We do it as a nurse. We have those relationships regardless of where we sit in our with our religion, with where we stand in ethical practices. We do that every day. We set aside who we are, in our personal life, and we take it and we.
And Maureen, if you could begin to wrap it up.
I'm done with that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Liberty, how about you? What's the points of possible common ground that you see?
The common ground is my people are perishing because of lack of knowledge. This is the common ground. We all agree that education, we have lack of it in regards to pro-life or pro-choice. We actually have lack of knowledge, and people are perishing. Babies who have heartbeats, which are life has heartbeat. Every heartbeat that means there's life there. So the common ground is absolutely not just black or white. There are gray areas in life, and that's the whole part where we're growing in the knowledge of life, what is death, and actually taking responsibility for life. I feel like sometimes people take the pro-choice route because we're not ready to take responsibility for another life. And what better love is this, to just lay down your life for another one? I didn't know that before I knew Jesus, who is life. So the common ground for me is definitely, education, knowledge on what does the aftermath look like of an abortion, instead of just, oh, let me get rid of this thing, I don't have to deal with it. What's the aftermath? Because trust me, there is an aftermath. And many people deal with a mental, you were talking about mental issues, and many people have gone to drugs and alcohol. They're trying to suppress the pain of what just happened. Well, what just happened was murder. I know, because I suppressed the pain of murdering another life and not wanting to have to deal with the responsibility of that life. So lack of knowledge, people are perishing. Common ground is absolutely for those educators and teachers that are passionate about either way. They're passionate about people, to really bringing this, knowledge to the table instead of just saying, hey, no more abortions. Well, I don't think that's fair either, because there are certain, like what did she say? The ectopic pregnancy. I mean, that's a case where you could clearly see that would be, probable cause for an abortion if it's going to hurt the mother or the child wouldn't be well. So, I don't think it's just so black and white, but I do believe there's lack of knowledge and people are dying because of it.
All right, thank you, Liberty. And now we want to open this question to you all in the room. And the question is, what is an action or actions that you could support and that you think people on the other side or all sides of this issue could support? And again, we're going to call on a balance of pro-life, pro-choice, and other views. And let me go first to Sally. I think you're pro-choice, Sally. Go ahead. What's your idea? And take up to 2 minutes to share your ideas.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Soleil.
Oh, I'm sorry, Soleil.
That's fine. I guess what I haven't heard in any of much of at all is, anything about the sperm donor. And we look at it now as a woman's responsibility, a woman's choice. And if we're going to change, when, at birth is required in all cases, if it's forced, if it's, then maybe the responsibility should be spread out. Maybe it should not just be the woman or the birth parent, the person who gives birth, but it should be the person who provided the sperm, and it should be the community that requires the child to be born. We can't just say you're required now. And so what are we going to do about healthcare, childcare, education, everything? If it's now required, then you have to look bigger than just that one person that carries the child to term. It's not just that one person's responsibility. And that is what I see as the biggest thing that we need to address, that we need to talk about, that we need to spread that responsibility out then, if this is the solution. I actually don't think abortion is the best answer anyway, but I'm saying then you've got to have something better than just making the woman carry that responsibility for the child. It's not fair to the child. That's my opinion.
All right, thank you. And then I'm going to go to Ryan. Ryan Ruffiner, what's an action or actions that you would support and that you think people on the other side might support?
Well, I think one of the ones in general is part of the reason that I came here is because ever since I discovered Braver Angels, I now know that there's a place to talk about these things without a lot of essentially name calling, demonizing, dehumanizing, tribalistic bullshit, pardon my French. Because one of the things is I'm mostly pro-choice, but I know it's not that simple. And in my sphere, I mostly know pro-choice people. It ends up being this thing where people don't really want to talk about the complexities of abortion. They just kind of want to complain about the other side that they've never even talked to. And so what happens is usually their standpoint is it's only a woman's issue. And anybody who disagrees with me is either a tyrannical, power-hungry male who's looking to control women's bodies, or they're a woman who is too ignorant to understand that she should be pro-choice. And neither of those perspectives are conducive to solving this problem. I think one of the things is, I don't see the lady's name anymore, but what she brought up was, well, it's also like we have to involve men. We can't just say it's a woman's choice. And then when men aren't part of the abortion debate, people go, well, where are the men? Why are men not being allies in this regard? Well, you've told us it's not our decision. It's not our choice, which I think is one of those things where it's like, look, if we're talking about childcare, whether it's the quality of life after the child is born or before, that baby, fetus, whatever you want to call it, is 50% of the male's genes. And we know the statistics on having a father in the home is really important for children. And so you need that father in the home as well. So in that regard, I think we should involve men in the conversation. We should, in terms of faith, we heard a lot of people cite their faith as reasons both for and against abortion, pro-life, pro-choice. I think in terms of religion, we can say that, your religion can maybe protect you from having anything imposed on you. I don't think that our personal religious beliefs should allow us to impose those restrictions, whatever they may be, on other people.
And begin to wrap it up, Ryan.
Okay, yeah, and just education in general. We heard a number of people talk about how important it is to get the facts. Well, what are those facts unmarred by ideologies
All right.
or tribal?
Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to go to Michael Gardner. Michael, what points of common ground do you see?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. And Michael, are you
I
able to
think
turn your video on?
I did. I don't know how it got
There we
turned
go.
off.
Now they can see you. Excellent.
Thank you. Yes, I think both sides have to acknowledge the strength of the other side's argument, has to understand it. For myself, I'm pro-life, but I have to acknowledge that if people have any rights at all, the control of your own body is the most fundamental right that you can have or lose. And that can't be taken lightly or ignored or glossed over. For the pro-choice side, I think they must acknowledge the nature of the fetus or the embryo that is being destroyed in an abortion. Our history is full of examples where one group of people calls another group of people not human or subhuman. And that if we classify any living human as subhuman, that leads to trouble. Our history is full of it, in genocides, enslavement, mass control of people because they, whoever they are not human. So I just, I could go into other things too, but those two things, to acknowledge the other side of the argument and to incorporate that into your own position. How do you get around the nature of what's being destroyed in an abortion, and how do you get around the lack of self-control that making abortion illegal is to the woman? So that would be my 2 points.
Thank you, Michael. We're going to go to, I hope I'm saying your name right, Risa?
It's Risa. Thank you for
Risa.
trying. It's okay. I answer to lots of pronunciations. Thank you. I really want to appreciate some of the things that I've heard in this last section. I think I was hoping to hear more where our common ground would hopefully be that the commonality is reducing the number of unwanted pregnancies. It got mentioned a little bit, but I think this is what we really need to talk about, because I feel like the people who are against people having a right to choose how to take care of their own bodies are often the people who are against sex education, who are also against making birth control accessible. And it's proven that sex education and making birth control easily accessible reduce the number of abortions. We're never going to get rid of them. We just have to acknowledge that's a fact. It's making abortion illegal just results in adult women and others who carry pregnancies die. That's reality. So how can we come together and get sex education in every single school? How can we do that? How can we get together and make healthcare available to everyone? What can we do? It's been shown that the dollars have been shown a single payer healthcare system would cost us less as a society. But unfortunately, a few wealthy people at the top are really successful in the divide and conquer strategy, and they divide, and this is a wedge issue. So let's come together and figure out how we create a society where people can have health care and have birth control easily accessible, where a person who gets pregnant and it's their third child and they can't afford it, lives in a society where they're making a living wage. And maybe that's a child they would like to have, but they can't afford it. Let's create that.
And take about 50. Okay, great. You're wrapping up. Thank you. I'm going to go now to Rick. And Rick, you have a really long last name that I won't attempt to say, but Rick, you are up. What's your common ground that you see?
Thank you. Yes, I'm other, okay, which means my point of view tries to enrich the conversation, because I think it's a bit shallow. We're getting lost. We're kind of, we're getting lost. What I do, or what I've done, I haven't published it yet. I did a hermeneutics, biblical hermeneutics. That means interpreting specifically Exodus 34:6-7, where it says that we are more like a wave more than a particle. The individual is a particle, okay? The wave is the great grandparent, the parents, and so on. According to my hermeneutical analysis, the great grandparents give us the beliefs for the spirit, you want to call it. The grandparents give us the mind, and the parents, obviously the physical, the sperm and the egg. And then we're born, but it carries forward. We in turn, whatever we do, we are responsible, because we carry it on to our children and our children's children to the third generation. So even though I do agree that the government has no business in our beds, but the people do. I mean, we are part of the community. I'm not pro-choice or pro-life, I'm just saying that whatever action we take, we owe it to our great-grandparents, whatever they were thinking, I don't know. And whatever action we do, our children and children's children, will be bearing the benefits, or, the
Rick,
guilt.
if I could ask you, if you could maybe crystallize it, what's the common ground that you see potentially on this issue?
Well, the common ground is that we're being manipulated by the Democratic Party, the Republican and Democrats, putting a wedge so that we take sides and entrench the two-party system, which is anti-democratic. That's the common ground, We should become aware of that,
All right. Thank you so much, Rick.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to go to Amanda Trueblood. Amanda, what's an action or actions that you support and that you think people on the other side might support?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Amanda, are you able to turn on your video?
No, it's not working. I've tried to. turn
Okay,
it
no
on.
worries. No
Yeah.
worries.
So I think a lot of things that have been said tonight are interesting, and I agree with, like the pro-choice one. I consider myself pro-life, but the pro-choice woman who said, oh, I just lost the thought. I'm so sorry. I just lost that thought. Oh, about men taking responsibility. I would be all for medical care is, during pregnancy is expensive. And I would be for men having to pay for half of the medical care for a pregnant woman. I think part of the things that people aren't really aware of how extreme Roe versus Wade and its subsequent cases were by defining viability as 24 weeks. This was 50 years ago, this was decided. With advances in medicine, we now have infants surviving born at 21 weeks. So to say that, oh, well, we decided this 50 years ago before we had the medical information we have now, I don't think that we can really, stick to that. And also the fact that many European countries have earlier limits. A lot of them limit elective abortions at 12 weeks. And beyond that, they have to, some countries have to get 2 doctors to certify that it's medically necessary. I feel like most pro-choice people in this country would go nuts if we said something like that here. But the United States really has been pretty extreme because of Roe versus Wade and its subsequent cases. I don't know that other people would agree, but I would like to come to some middle ground. I mean, if we developed more laws like Europe, where we say, okay, it's up until this point, it's okay, but after that, you need certain reasons such as rape or medical necessity. To me, that's very middle ground and common sense. Unfortunately, I don't see many people on either side with the way the Republicans are even leaving rape out of some laws now. I don't know, but I really like Braver Angels for trying to have this conversation and trying to bring people together.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Let's go to Judy Doyle.
Hi, thank you for setting this up. I appreciate that a lot. I wanted to suggest something really very concrete. I think the common ground, nobody's really talked about that much, But one of the things I think we all agree is that we don't want to see women dying from complications from pregnancy and childbirth. And some of the laws that have been instituted since the Dobbs decision have put women's lives on the line. And so I guess a very concrete thing that I think maybe could be done is for an organization of obstetricians and gynecologists like ACOG or somebody like that to set up some sort of model legislation piece to define medical emergencies, to protect women's health and well-being, and define what those exceptions should be. I'm terribly, and then people could lobby their legislators in states that have implemented abortion restrictions to maybe put those into effect, because what we're seeing now in horrifying numbers is cases of women really facing the inability to get the care that they need. These are women, they're not seeking abortions. They're in tragic situations, ectopic pregnancies, ruptures of membranes, they've had miscarriages, and they can't get the procedures that they need because the laws have been not written clearly enough, and doctors and nurses and hospitals are afraid to give them that care. So if there is common ground that we want to protect the lives of women who are pregnant and going through childbirth and having horrible situations, I think that needs to be done.
All right, thank you. And now I'm going to go to, let's see here, Robert Munson. Robert, you're up.
Okay, two quick points. One is to have prenatal care, and I say that because our adopted, the biological mother of our adopted son never had prenatal care, and he was born like 4 days after we knew of the existence. The other thing is that we're talking about pro-choice, and there's tens of thousands of children under the age of 5 that die from preventable diseases in the world. And if we just got people from both sides to donate to UNICEF or whatever, that this would hurry along the progress.
Yo, moderator.
David, you're muted.
My apologies. I was muted. You can't have a forum without a moderator, right? Let me see. Wynette Sills, are you here? And if you are, Wynette, did you want to share a common ground action point? Just go ahead and unmute yourself if you are.
Hello, good evening. Certainly, I think there is an opportunity to come alongside women who are facing the challenges of an unexpected pregnancy. I think in every community, you can find your local life-affirming, pro-woman, pro-resources clinic, and that can be found at optionline.org. And so I would just try to look across the political spectrum, and isn't that something we can all do, is to come alongside women with resources and encouragement so that her options are broader than just considering abortion as her only alternative in those difficult circumstances. So, I mean, that'd be something I would invite people to unite together behind, is to truly help women in these conditions.
All right, thank you. And with that, we are going to, before we close out here, we're going to hear from our speakers on what they're taking away from this conversation. We're going to put an evaluation link in the chat, a feedback form. And if you could copy and paste once that feedback form and then put it into your browser and then fill it out after we're finished here. And so Apple, if you could put that feedback form into the chat, and including, we do this once a month, we the People's Forum. We'd love to hear your ideas on other issues that we might address on these forums. So that feedback form is there. And then if you're new to Braver Angels and you believe in the mission of bringing people together across the political divide, across the divides on issues like abortion, and you're not already a member, we invite you to join us and become a member. It's only $12 a year. Many members choose to give more, but you're invited to we've just recently restarted Braver Angels member meetings once a month, and so you'll be invited to those. And check out a local alliance, a local Braver Angels, see if there's a local Braver Angels group in your area. So to join Braver Angels as a member, www.braverangels.org/join. And that is also in the chat. So Mary Thomas Valens is here, and Mary is going to tell us about the possibility for diving even deeper on this issue using Braver Angels workshops. So Mary, if you could unmute yourself, and if you could talk about the Common Ground workshop on abortion that you and some others have been leading. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, first of all, I've really found this conversation to be so powerful, and I'm in awe of the courage of everybody who has spoken on such an emotional and divisive at times topic. So the Common Ground workshop would be the perfect follow-up for what you're doing right now, because you've already been discussing many of the things that are included in the Common Ground workshop. The format's a little different. People self-identify on a topic. Sometimes it's red, blue, but most of the time it's based on one side of the issue, gun rights or gun safety. In this case, pro-life, pro-choice. But there are 8 people on each side, and then there are observers, and there's 2 moderators. And like many of you, you start out sharing your connection with the issue, personal stories voluntarily. And then you work in separate groups, and that's to create a very safe environment for sharing openly. And many of you have already mentioned how this is such a great format, Braver Angels, in creating productive conversations. So the separate groups speak together first, and then they meet together on several occasions in different formats within the 3-hour workshop, and sometimes 3.5 hours. So the main questions are, excuse me, I had COVID and I have a cough that has not gone away. The main questions are many of what you've shared tonight. So what values do you have on the issue of pro-life, pro-choice? And that would be shared within your individual groups first. What problems and concerns do you have about the issue, which you've also discussed? And what solutions do you have that possibly the other side would consider? And the power of this that takes it deeper than what you've done tonight, and you've done a fabulous job, is in the individual groups, everybody decides which items they have unanimous consent. And this is not like a jury. There's no pressure at all. You can just say, I don't agree with that one, and you can tell why, or you can just say no or not yet, whatever. But each side comes up with a set of unanimous values, concerns, and solutions. And then the 2 sides share them with the total group. Each side can ask questions of the other, just like you've done tonight, questions of curiosity or clarification. And then we work to see which ones can be agreed upon with the 2 sides. And what's amazing is, I counted it up last time, in June, we did a Common Ground workshop right when the ruling was so incredibly hot. And some people were concerned that we were going to do this with Braver Angels, but like tonight, everybody was very respectful. But when I looked at the data, 87% of the values, concerns, and solutions were agreed upon unanimously. I mean, that is huge. And if we had had more time, and we're building that in now, we could go back even more and try to find ways, the ones that are not agreed upon, what would it take to find greater common ground? And in the workshop, we do try to do that. Sometimes it's just one or two words that take it away. But the goal is to come up with a set of common values, and that means 100% agreement, which is incredible if you think about it. What are the values, concerns, and solutions this group has? And then we brainstorm action plans. What can we do about it? And oftentimes people are motivated to go talk to, well, if it's a school board issue, their school boards or their legislators or their faith people or just their friends and family. And so that's kind of the overview. David, I don't know if you want to make something more.
Yeah, no, that's great. Mary, would you be okay putting your email in the chat in case people would like to contact you?
Yes.
So you could do this in your local community. It could be an in-person workshop, bring up to 8 pro-choice and pro-life people together. It could be something that could happen on Zoom. But the value here is that it's a chance to go deeper and in a more intimate way in personal conversation with others.
So
really
right now,
go
the
ahead.
chat will only allow me to chat to you.
Ah, gotcha.
So,
okay, if you could chat that to me, and then I'll put that out
perfect.
to everyone.
and we've had now 2 national common ground workshops on pro-life, pro-choice, and they've gone very, very well. And I would be happy, since we don't have a national one scheduled, I'd be happy with Zoom to do it anywhere you have the interest.
Excellent. So if you're interested
RainbowAngels.org.
in participating or maybe helping Mary organize one, you can email her at this email address that I'm going to send out to everyone in the meeting. So be in touch with Mary if you'd like to help with that.
And an in-person's cool too. If you find people in your local area, it's pretty powerful. Be face-to-face with people in your own community too.
Absolutely.
So thank you for asking me, David.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Let's close it now, but to close us out, I'm going to invite our 3 first speakers. You're going to have the last word, and I'm going to start with Maureen. And the question is, what are you taking with you from our time together? And just in a couple sentences, Maureen, what are you taking with you from our time together?
What I'm taking with me tonight is a reciprocated respect in this opportunity to have this conversation. I'm also taking with me ideas and things that I didn't think about, such as I wasn't thinking about religious freedoms. I wasn't thinking about responsibility of the father, which of course in my situation I had the support. The other thing that I'm taking with me is that they mentioned about ACOG. We already have ACOG working groups when it comes to reproductive rights, is what we call that. And, we say it's reproductive rights, but also, again, engaging the father or the sperm donor that was touched upon. I believe that we are all responsible for one another. Having a system where we support mothers and children is also we have to be supportive of one another in a community, regardless of where we are in this pro-choice, pro-life. It would be much easier if we all took care of each other in a community-based fashion. And that's what I try to bring at the bedside when I have a mother who has nothing, and I'm taking care of her with her neonate. She's who I take care of, and that's what we need to do with one another and truly give it from my heart. Again, I take many ideas forward. I wish we could have more time, and I think we could talk for hours on this conversation about pro-life, pro-choice. And thank you, Mary, for that opportunity. I will be tapping into that. And what I take from this is the fact that we've all been able to have this conversation together without negative words and lots of great ideas. So thank you for listening to my experience and my story. And I appreciate everybody on the call that has shared.
Liberty, what are you taking with you from our time together tonight in a couple sentences? Liberty, if you could unmute yourself. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go to Janelle. Janelle, what are you taking with you from our time together?
Okay, I literally mirror everything that Maureen said. Like she was in my head, but I do appreciate everybody coming out today and actually having respectful dialogue. And I was expecting a little bit something harsher, but I do, we did good tonight. So the fact that we can come together and actually have this conversation, and, you know, everything brought up, I thought about it, but literally I have a lot more to kind of think about now, and kind of reaching out to the youth I reach out to. So, you know, thanks for the input, everybody. And I appreciate you for coming out.
Thank you, Janelle. And Liberty, I see that you're there. I know you had some Wi-Fi issues earlier. Liberty, what are you taking with you from our, there you are. What are you taking with you from our time together?
Thank you. The thing is that every single choice, everybody's choice affects more people than the one making the choice. The mother, the father, the baby, community, taxpayers. And I feel like extremists give a false representation to the party that they're representing. It's not fair to say that extremists can represent a specific people group. The extremists are a people group of their own. And the last thing I would like to say about all of this is that America is founded on God we trust. I didn't make that up. That was way before my time. Way before I ever became a Christian, America has been founded in God we trust. That being said, God's grace and love have proven to be the balm necessary for healing the emotional pain incurred by an act that cannot be reversed.
Thank you, Liberty. And thank you to Liberty, Janelle, and Maureen, and everyone else who shared a little bit of your story and your perspective. We're honored that we were able to share that with each other here. And I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation of we the people. So until next time, let's go out there and build a house united. Good night, everyone.